Okay, we're going to get started, and to start with, I'd like to have Carol come up and give us a prayer for the day, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, just like the agenda says.
Everybody please stand. Father, we thank you for the freedom we have in America to gather together with like-minded patriots to discuss and educate ourselves and others about the political condition of our country and the candidates' positions on important issues that affect our daily lives. We are truly a blessed nation because of our ancestors' courage, faith, and trust in you. Grace us with your peaceful presence tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. And if the veterans would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I showed you the membership cards a little earlier, and we were passing around the sign-up sheet. If you want to be a member of the Tea Party, we appreciate you being part of our organization. So look that over and fill it out, please, if you're interested. Tonight, we have two people that are running for Secretary of State. This is an important office, as you know. And so we're going to have them tell you what they're going to do to make things better for us, if whichever one wins the election. Just before that, though, we're going to take a few minutes more and talk about the postcard program and the scholarship. And let's do it later. Okay. So let's get started, and I think we have the cards you passed out. Do you have those cards? And you have questions filled out on them? Okay. We want to pass them to this side, please, and we'll have them answer. We'll pick them up. So that the judge, by the way, sitting over here is, again, not Judge Haluka. Apparently he couldn't make it tonight, and we're sorry about that. But Myra is going to ask the questions for us, just like the judge would. Okay. We got the cards. Are we picking them up? Moderator. Oh, I'll give them. While we're picking up these cards, let me go through this, the forum guidelines here. The forum will be held in Mayfield. You already know that. Campaign signs are not allowed in the building. The forum moderator will be Myra. The audience will be given an opportunity to write down questions for the candidates. The moderator will review the questions and will decide which questions to ask. Hopefully we can get them all done. If we can't, I believe the candidates will stick around for a little while and answer any questions that didn't get answered during the program. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. You have 90 seconds to answer the questions when they're presented to you. Excuse me. They have and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. So if one of the candidates says something about the other candidate, then you have 30 seconds, to respond to that rebuttal. If one candidate is named by another candidate, and 1 minute for a closing statement. Okay, so at the end of it all, when we answer all the questions, You have 1 minute for a closing statement. Okay? Any questions on that, folks? Okay. Okay, due to time restraints, all of the questions from the audience may not be addressed. I hope candidates will be able to stay after for the meeting and maybe answer any questions that didn't get answered in the first place. Okay, any questions on that from anybody? If not, okay. We're going to start this off. You got questions, Myra?
I have one so far.
Just one?
Yeah.
That's how we start with. Okay, and...
Well, first we should start with opening statements.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And Mary, will you start with your opening statement, please?
Sure. Because I'm short, I will stand up at least so you can see me for my opening statement. Good evening. I am Mary Treder Lang, and I am running to be your next Secretary of State. I'm not a politician, and I'm not part of the establishment. I'm running to make a difference for the state and continue the forward momentum that we have worked so hard as Republicans the last 8 years. For the last 30 years, I've been a CPA. 15 of those years, I've worked and focused in computer security. I'd like to say that the next Secretary of State needs to have a modern-day set of skills to drive us forward as a state, and my platform of security, optimization, and stability speaks to that. Security being of the foremost important item on my platform, protecting the integrity of the vote, ensuring it's one citizen, one vote. Cybersecurity, protecting that vulnerable information being stored there from cyber attack and cyber theft. Optimization, delivering customer service support, taking modern-day technology and ensuring that we save you as taxpayers. Stability, continuing the forward momentum of the Secretary of States, our great Republican Secretary of States, moving that forward. Not only do I have the endorsement of Candace Miller, but I also have Terry Lynn Land. One of my opponents will say that he was Assistant Secretary of State for 7.5 years, and it's not this opponent. And what would you think if I told you that his former boss, Candace Miller, endorses my candidacy? I have the vote of confidence from 2 former Secretary of States that I can get in there in day one and do the job. I ask for your vote not only at the convention at the end of August, but I also ask for it in November. I am running against Jocelyn Benson and her radical agenda, and we need to make sure we have the strongest candidate to go up against her, and that is me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Give her a hand. Thank you. Nice boots.
Are you officiating now, too? Lapeer, Tea Party, Republican. The time has come for change. From Washington to Michigan. My name is Joseph Guzman. For the last 14 semesters, I've been at MSU. I've devoted roughly equal parts of my career to being an engineer, being a government manager, and being a professor. I started out in engineering. I figured out early on that the most important problems we need to work on are people problems, problems and good government. So I devoted myself to studying policy and economics. I have a PhD in economic analysis and policy from the Stanford Business School. I have a master's degree in economics, master's degree in statistics, master's degree in business research, along with an MBA. I performed the duties of Comptroller of the Navy at the tail end of the Bush administration, which was a $142 billion budget and 5,000 people. I helped establish biometrics in the DoD. I signed out the first specification for biometrics in the DoD. I'm here to convince you, not coerce you, that I'm the best person to represent our party. I'm here to convince you, not coerce you, that I'm the best person to beat the well-groomed and extremely radical candidate that the Democrats are going to throw at us. And most importantly, I'm here to convince you, not to coerce you, that I am the person to deliver on what you need from our next Secretary of State. DMV that is smarter, better, faster. More transparency from your government. And critically, most important, is an election system that we can all have complete confidence in. You see, I believe that our constitutional republic, our constitutional form of government is under threat. That your vote is under threat. That we need to defend your vote as though it were the last line of defense against anarchy. Because actually it is. It's time for change from Washington to Michigan. We cannot dream. Oh, I didn't see the 15. Okay.
Oh, you got it.
Okay.
Keep it.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the marker. Thank you.
Give me a hand, please. Thank you, both of you. That's we needed that. I might also add at this time, there's a third member that we invited that was going to have, but he's got business meetings tonight and he couldn't make it, and that's Stan Grott, also running for Secretary of State. And I also, if you look in the paper, when you read our article on this, I said these folks were going to be nominated in August, and you've already been nominated. Is that right? Weren't you decided on something at the convention? Okay. Right. Yeah, I'm a precinct delegate. I don't know. So anyway, so it's August 25th is when they get nominated. I just wanted to bring that out. Okay, thank you very much. And Myra, I think we're going to start with questions, and you pick who goes first.
Okay. Joseph, you can go first. Okay. The first question is, please address the idea of early voting by either booths, absentee, or mail, or in any other way or fashion.
And you have 90 seconds, Joe.
We presently allow absentee voting. I do not favor expanding those methods other than no excuse absentee. I think that early voting can sometimes lend itself to some let's just say, non-optimal practices of figuring out who's voted and trying to sweep the votes in, and especially if you think you're behind. So I think we need to make sure that we have a system where everybody who should vote can vote, and they find it very easy, and everybody who shouldn't be voting finds it nearly impossible, and we have complete confidence in the processes that make up our system so that we know that our votes are not compromised in any way.
Mary?
So, first of all, I don't know if you all realize that our state is probably one of the most decentralized states for the electoral process. We have close to 1,600 clerks, county, township, and city clerks throughout this state. So to pull off, just from an administrative legitimate standpoint, early voting, it is an administrative nightmare. I have met with well over 20 clerks, and it is not something that they would welcome. The other thing is the same-day voting, which kind of falls into this early voting as well. That is detrimental to our entire electoral process system, in that if they were allowed to do any same-day voting, you could have people, as the Dems are noted for, hopping around to various areas and various polls and voting multiple times, and until we sync the databases together, we won't know until after the fact of the polls, and we have the heads nodding up and down. So, as Joe had indicated too, in regards to the absentee process, and many of the clerks are decisive in that process, whether or not they want to have no reason or just leave it the way that it is right now. I will support anything that is approved and abided by through the legislation process in that process. Thank you. Those seconds come very quickly.
Okay. Next question is, what are you going to do about Detroit and others being unrecountable because they don't do their jobs properly, handling the voting ballots, etc.? And do you believe the people that caused the districts to be unrecountable should be prosecuted?
Mary, you're first.
Okay, so first of all, I am a future Secretary of State full of solutions. And my solution to fix this problem that we had is to have individuals that are being recruited as our poll workers that are designated from the Secretary of State's office. They will be recruited from the corporate world, service organizations, as well as college students. And they will be a pool that's available the day of elections in which we can disseminate throughout the state when we need individuals at those poll things. Secondly, to improve the state-of-the-art training. Right now, the clerks are only required to be trained every 2 years. What I will make mandated is that all poll workers, whether it's the ones we're recruiting in this new pool full of solutions, they will be trained 30 days out of the electoral process, and they will go through a certification process in which they need to follow instructions, they need to know how to add, and they need to adhere to the policies and procedures that are required from them in regards to the whole entire process. And what was the latter part of that question, too? I apologize.
Do you believe the people that caused the districts to be unrecountable
because I don't want to run out of
should
time.
be prosecuted?
My legislative team that I will have in place, I've already met with some of the elected folks. We will pass bills. Good news is Ruth Johnson will be available to help disseminate some rules or bills through the process so that I, as the next Secretary of State, have action by law, legislative approved, that I can do action with those clerks, whether it be to remove them or penalize them in some way, shape, or form.
Joseph?
Wait, could you just repeat the question just so I don't have to ask it?
What are you going to do about Detroit and other cities being unrecountable because they don't do their jobs properly handling voting ballots? And do you believe the people that caused the districts to be unrecountable should be prosecuted?
So, yeah, again, I think we are thinking along some of the same lines. I'd like to start, so right now we have a lot of our training. One of the things that the Secretary of State's office does is provide training, and they also have their own training materials in these clerks' locations. But I'd like to help centralize some of that and put it online and set up something like an SOS University. Because we do a lot of training, but we should do a lot more, and there's no reason we shouldn't be able to do more electronically and do more of it more frequently. Because one of the most frequent complaints, I've met with dozens of clerks as well, is that they don't get enough practice. They don't get enough. They have people they train, and by the time they come to election day, they might have forgotten what they learned because they only saw it once. So we need to find ways to do that. Maybe even simulate an election. And have them practice. But the other thing is we have a shortage of poll workers, especially in Detroit. So again, doing it electronically and setting up an online system would help us generate more poll workers as well. Some of the practices are different from place to place, but working centrally, we can help harmonize some of that. We have to be careful if we focus on a place like Detroit, because there are multiple counties that have more votes than registered voters, and we need to address them equally and not be accused of disparate impact. But I think one of the key issues is having more poll workers. And also I'd like to have the Secretary of State's office handle the anomalies. So a lot of times they have anomalies and they just say, they say let it continue, we'll take notes later. I would definitely also refer any violations to the Attorney General. Thank you.
With the Texas voter ID levy going into effect, what is your stand on state ID being shown in order to vote, and do you support or oppose this measure?
I like the idea of a state ID, and one of the things I'd like to do is we issue a voter card. Look, right now we have multiple forms of ID that we can use. Some of them have electronic means, and some don't. Some are RFID. If we're looking at the new real ID. But I'd like to just simply issue a voter card with, it doesn't have to have the highest quality of picture, put a picture on it. There's no reason we can't do that. Issue a voter card with a picture, and that's what you can bring in at the very least. So I favor ID. It's reasonable and legitimate even in countries that we think are not as advanced as we are. There's no reason we can't offer an ID. One of the key arguments against it is that it serves as, it's effectively a poll tax, and you have to pay for that ID. So I'd like to make it free. Even if it's inexpensive, we can make it free. I mean, because it could be inexpensive if it's low tech, we can make it free.
Mary?
So in regards to the state ID, I mentioned it in my platform, security is utmost importance, and ensuring the integrity of the voting process. And that is, and I will push for, making it mandatory to show an ID to vote. Now, if any of you are precinct delegates, you've received my blast that I've had in the past, and I speak specifically about even having a driver's license that is a different color for non-citizens. I want those type of things to be readily available during the voting process. Right now, we have in a driver's license up in the corner an LT that indicates limited term for non-citizens. I want, whether it be law enforcement, whether you're checking out a book or boarding an airplane or voting, most importantly, we can identify where the citizens are and who's entitled to voting and where they're not. In regards to that, too, what is imperative is that, and I just came from a meeting earlier today. We honored some law enforcement. Today is their annual day of recognition, and they did that up in Lansing. And I mentioned to them about having a different color ID, and they thought that was wonderful for those non-citizens. So it's easily identifiable when individuals are pulled over by law enforcement or they're trying to go through the voting process. But I think it's a requirement that just as you have to check out a book, you have to show an ID. Just as you board an airplane, you have to show ID. This is a privilege, this is an honor to vote, and yes, you should have to show an ID to vote.
Joseph?
Yes. I took that one first.
Okay, sorry. Next question. Okay, Mary will start this one. In light of the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision ruling that the federal law prohibiting gambling on sports is unconstitutional, please discuss the idea of a dedicated lottery for road improvement.
Well, I think we had a little discussion about this before this meeting began. And, I think, I had come with, I'm a CPA. I've been a CPA for 30 years. I ran many divisions and districts throughout the state, as well as even the North American Division of Sales. But I bring with me the set of tools to think out of the box, be creative, and utilize some things that we haven't utilized in the past in order to keep the state moving forward, as well as the Secretary of State. If something like that was ever approved by law, of course, I would enforce it and push it forward. I think it's an idea, and I welcome all those type of opportunities to think out of the box and be creative in ways that we can improve and create an environment in the Secretary of State's office that has modern-day set of skills. And that is continuing the rollout of the My Time, which you can make an appointment ahead of time, broadening and expanding the online services that are there today, and even taking the kiosks that have been tested and proven and partnering up with businesses so that you're able to go and execute transactions with the Secretary of State in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day, whenever, 24/7, with these retail operations similar to a Myers that are open there. So my whole thing is delivering customer services, doing it in the most fiscally conservative way, but most efficient manner, but also honoring creative, out-of-the-box thinking to bring in those new ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a great question. I do not favor setting up a lottery to pay for our roads for a couple reasons. One of the things is that we've seen, first of all, I have a master's in statistics, and I know you can't win by gambling, okay, number one. But one of the things we've seen with these lotteries that were originally set up for the children is that as the lottery money goes up, the other allocations or the responsibility of the state legislatures kind of goes down. The net going to schools is about the same. And the other thing is, you look at that lottery money as free money, so now you can spend it in more frivolous ways. So I just don't favor it. It's not good government. And also, we all know that lotteries are regressive taxes. If you ever go to a casino, especially in other parts of the country, you'll see that some of the most destitute people are over there putting their last shekels in those bandits. So I don't really favor it, but I do favor some other things to improve our roads. And one of the things that I've been talking about is setting up through the Secretary of State, because you are the Chief Motor Vehicles Officer, and it has a big impact on the people we serve, is setting up an open database for roads contracting. So that we have open information across the states of what is being spent by whom, under what specifications, who are the contractors, how they get them, where was that money spent, how much was spent. There was an attempt by the legislature to include something like that recently, and it was blocked. So I say there's no reason not to do that voluntarily through the Secretary of State, and that would be a contribution to open, transparent government.
Are there any more questions?
Anybody?
Yeah, I have another question.
Okay, hold on. Let me get this to you. You don't mind taking questions
Oh, of
from
course.
the audience?
No, that's what we came here for.
Do you want me to take this one first? Does it take long?
All right, this question deals with the multiple fees on registration for families that have 3, 4 vehicles. And some vehicles you want to use seasonally, but you're double dipped by paying a double fee, license fee for it. And then the insurance is tacked onto that, and so forth. There's a big expense. I'd like you to address that. I think single families that have multiple vehicles, especially in farm communities where they're using vehicles for very unique but limited purposes, they seem to be doubly taxed, and that's the gist of the question.
So just so we go in order, I'll take that first, and then Mary take the next one. So I also am one of those families that pays multiple fees. We have 5 kids. 3 of them are in college age now, and we've had multiple cars, and and we have ungodly insurance rates on top of that. So I want to really pay attention to the fees. You know, when I say I'm going to, in my literature, that I'm not going to increase the budget of the Secretary of State for the existing duties, that involves being smarter, better, faster, and freezing our fees. The one fee I'd immediately get rid of is the online user fee. You have to pay $3 for online transactions. There's no reason to do that. Those online transactions come free to the DM, to the Secretary of State, basically. So, especially once you set it up. So I'd like to do away with that fee. I think we need to look at a structure for how to make it easier to turn on and turn off your registration. But you know, the big source is your insurance rates. That is the big killer. And again, as Secretary of State, I will use the bully pulpit to help promote real reform. We need to look at what is the best state for auto insurance and strive for that. Not just cut a backroom deal to hold the dogs off for 5 years. That would be my approach.
So as I have traveled around the state, and trust me, I'm by far the hardest working candidate, follow along on my Facebook and you'll see my travel path. If you get on my email blast, you'll also see where I'm going for the whole week ahead. But one of my key components on my optimization portion of my platform is that it speaks specifically about my background as a CPA, doing more with less, being fiscally conservative. I've already rallied my team of legislators. I feel the pain of these fees, and my ultimate goal is to be able to do more with less with my budget of $250 million that I'll get from appropriations, and show ways in which I can save money. I'll go to the legislature and I'll ask them to reduce these fees. These fees that are etched in stone are controlled right now and approved by the legislature. So this is why this team that I spoke about earlier are core to me, working with them and giving money back to you. Now, in regards to these seasonal things, and I hear it quite often amongst the farmers, I hear them amongst vehicles that they have, the show vehicles down Gratiot Avenue and things like that. I want to work with the consumer to make it so that it is the best way for them. There is no reason they have to pay for a full year and incur those hardcore fees when they're only using those vehicles in a limited basis. I will pursue that and see a way to stop that. Just like that stop sign that just...
There's a reference to by far the hardest working candidate. Does that call for a rebuttal, or does that not? I beg to differ.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody? Go ahead, Carl.
And in regards to protecting the vote, you both talked about having good IDs and also more training to ensure that areas of the state that have been deficient as far as how they keep track of our vote do a better job moving forward. What else needs to be done in terms of preventing hacking, cyber threats to our vote count, after it's happened and before it gets to the centralization that it needs? What additional steps would you recommend?
I think first and foremost is I will never support the electronic voting process. These will remain a paper process. Myself as a bean counter coming from the auditing world, as well as taxes, but we need to have that reconciliation place in process to ensure that we have fair outcomes of our election process. We spoke about making the ID a mandatory requirement to ensure that one citizen, one vote. Also, the legislature just approved that once it's going to be required by the next Secretary of State, at least once a month we're going to do the crossing of the Social Securities to make sure that we eliminate those individuals that have passed away. My goal is there's no reason with my modern day technology background of computers that we can't be doing that on a daily basis. So that's going to be a regular thing that's going to be done and conducted in my office. On top of that, right now we are not in Erica States, which is one of the popular ones that states will communicate with to knock out voters that are registered in 2 locations. I will make that an initiative right from the start to start cleaning up the voter files from that standpoint. If Ruth Johnson did not remove her 500,000 individuals, dead people, from our voter files before the 2016 election, this state here would not be red, nor would we have President Trump in our office today and be a Republican president. God bless her, and I will continue that forward momentum that she has created as a wonderful legacy of cleaning up the voter file.
So I'll just add that all of those dead voters, they seem to vote Republican until they die, and then all of a sudden they vote Democrat for the rest of the time. There's 3 things I've mentioned in my literature that I will never do, and one of them is move away from paper ballots because we have to have verification and auditability of our elections. The other thing, though, is if you talk to the organizations that study these things, the absentee ballot is a big source of illicit voting. And there's something we can do about it. Right now, it's possible to request, receive, fill out, return, and have an absentee ballot counted without ever having presented yourself. And the clerk's practices might vary, but general practice is to take those absentee ballots, request and return, and visually compare those signatures. I think there's no reason why we can't move to an electronically aided system. We have digital recognition of these signatures and run them through a machine. And if there's a problem, it doesn't mean we're not counting people, but if somebody's got a problem with their vote, we just say, Mrs. McGillicuddy, is this your vote? Did you submit this absentee ballot? Yes, fine, no problem. We send it through. The other thing is processes. We talked a little bit about the processes. In addition to making sure that those who shouldn't vote cannot, and they find it very, very difficult, I'd like to have all those irregular processes handled by the Secretary of State. They could come to our office, and we could definitely interrupt anything so that it's not repeated.
Another question? I used to be on the board of canvassers, and I really like the system we have with the drawing line and everything, the paper ballot. Do you know of a better one? Are you good with the one we have?
Okay, so I'm fine with the one we have, but I do understand that there, for local elections, there's some variation in the way they implement the ballot, and it probably stands some good review jointly with our clerks, so that we can come up with some uniform standards to improve that and make it not only easier for others, so they're not reinventing the wheel, but also so there's a little more consistency.
So I actually just had a meeting today in Lansing, and we spoke specifically about that. The entire, can you repeat your question again?
Well,
I apologize because.
I was just curious, I've approved the paper ballot,
Right.
and the system we have, I think, is good. Is there a better one that you know of?
So, and part of my meeting today was that we specifically spoke about best practices, and I explained to them as a businesswoman, the ballot process that we have today, there's 3 different voting systems that were approved by the legislature this past year, and they're all instituted, and the clerks had it as an option. They could pick the system. They're all paper ballots today. I will take the best practice, and I am going to do a great deal of research throughout the United States to find out whether it be the paper ballot process or other processes within our Secretary of State's office to see if there's ways of improving or things that are best practices already being done that can improve our entire system here in the Secretary of State's office here in the state of Michigan.
Okay, any other questions? No other questions. Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's give my hand. That's right. I'm sorry. I'm a little rusty here. It's the first one I've done this year.
So I opened, you end, right?
So I'll continue on my opening statement and add a little more. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that last December 2016, I had the extreme honor of being a national elector, being one of our representatives from Michigan to the Electoral College. And our vote really is under threat. We have to make sure that Michigan stays red. You see the frustration we have with seeing what's going on in D.C. And one of the things that makes America great, among many others, is an orderly transition of administrations. Well, that's been violated, my friends. It is not orderly anymore. They're trying to do a slow motion coup against us. We have to vote together, and we have to vote not only for Republicans, but Tea Party, Trump, Reform, people who will restore the government of the people. We can't drain the swamp in faraway Washington if we don't drain the swamp in all of our states, in the state tributaries to that swamp. In Michigan, I think in 2018 and 2020, we're going to lead the country once again. As Michigan goes, so goes the USA. And guess what, Lapeer? Michigan is looking pretty good.
Thank you.
So what's very important to consider is the next Secretary of State will define the political lines of the future for our state. Whether we adhere to the Powell standards of redistricting every 10 years, which is due in 2020, or the worst case, which might be a ballot initiative, and I hear it may, very possibly, is the voter, not politician. It is critical, and that is a Democratic initiative because they don't like the way that the rules are defined today. They can't get their districts and they can't get the majority. We cannot afford to have the Secretary of State to switch over to a Democrat. Candace Miller, when she made her endorsement to me, she said Mary Treder Lang is the only individual that can beat Jocelyn Benson come this November. It is critical that we make sure that George Soros, who is supporting her, is not allowed to control and manipulate the final results. Why do you think that he labeled Michigan as one of the top 2 states to go after? It is imperative that we keep this Republican and that we have the strongest and best candidate to go up against Jocelyn Benson and debate her, and that's me, Mary Treder Lang. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give them all this time. Everything done.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate both of you very much for coming here, and we hope you come back. Okay.
Happy to.
What you have to say is important because your position that you're running for is a very important position, and everybody needs to know that. Again, we're very happy you are coming. I'm sorry that normally we have more people here. But
No, my applause to all of you for coming out and for you again for
Thank you, Tim and Myra.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Myra, for doing a great job.
I just wish we had more time, so we'll be hanging around afterwards.
Well, you can. We got some more to do here. It's mostly local stuff. So we have changed around. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tom.
We passed up our postcard program and our scholarship program. And Greg, you ready to do that now?
Carl.
Or Carl, or whatever your name is. I'll get it right. I'll tell you what, get Carl in the help.
I was upset when Congress finally passed its fiscal year 2018 omnibus appropriations this past March, just a few months ago. You know, you'd think that with Republicans in control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we could pass spending, hopefully on time, but if not that, we could pass spending that was decreased, that was more fiscally responsible. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. Instead, we passed a $1.3 trillion boondoggle that increased our fiscal year spending by $138 billion over fiscal year 2017, and which busted the Budget Control Act of 2011 spending caps by $143 billion. So here we have a Republican-controlled Congress. It's gone astray. We must return it to a path of fiscal restraint, decreased spending, and smaller budgets. Now, Congress, of course, has started the process of doing the budget for 2019, and they're also working in the background to try to reform our budget process, which drastically is required. That's part of the biggest problem, that we cannot pass a budget, is the budget process itself is broken. But in the meantime, there are other things we can do, one of which is spending recession. You probably haven't heard of it, although it has commonly been practiced in the past. It's been about 20 years since it's been used. And what it is the president essentially asks Congress to cancel current appropriated spending. So recession is a permanent cancellation of previously approved funding for an agency or a program. It's the passage of a recession reduces or eliminates budget authority for spending prior to when that authority would normally end, so at the end of the fiscal year. The way that it works is, now recessions have been done all the way going back all the way to Thomas Jefferson, but on the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Act of 1974, the process was reformed so that if the president proposes specific spending cuts to spending authority, Congress then has 45 continuous session days, which, because they're always in session, is essentially the same as 45 calendar days, to respond. If they do nothing, then the proposal fails and spending continues as it has, or they can choose to approve all or part of what the president has proposed. And in the past, after the Budget Impoundment Act was passed, Presidents Ford through Clinton all proposed recessions that were passed by Congress. Since fiscal year 2000, this has not happened. So President George W. Bush, and Barack Obama did not propose any recessions. This is a process we need to bring back, however. And after the terrible budget that was just passed, conservatives and conservative groups have been pushing President Trump to use recession to start the process of rolling back and reforming our spending process. And just a few days ago, on May 8th, he proposed to Congress his first budget recession. It is a request to cancel spending of $15.3 billion. And this is the largest single recession request that has ever been sent to Congress. And it's actually predominantly for untapped funds, unobligated funds. This is money that is just sitting in the budget you might call it little pots of gold here and there scattered throughout. It actually doesn't currently have any plan to be used. So it's non-controversial and a no-brainer that we would cancel this spending. So for example, and I won't go through all of it, but the biggest chunk comes out of the CHIP program. That's Children's Health Insurance Program. Spending is appropriated by fiscal year. So if there's money left over after the end of that fiscal year, it cannot by law be spent. Well, there was $5 billion at the end of the 2017 fiscal year in the CHIP program. So President Trump is saying, hey, let's get rid of that spending. Let's make that unavailable. There's another $2 billion in the CHIP contingency fund. With an improving economy, we're not going to need such a large contingency fund in the event that states see more enrollment in the children's health care program than they expected. There's just going to be fewer people needing that. So the people who are opposed to this non-controversial, no-brainer rescissions package will say, oh, well, you can't cut CHIP. That's hurting the children. But that's not true. The Congressional Budget Office has already said that these cuts out of the CHIP program aren't going to hurt current operations, and it will have no effect for children going forward. But what the people who oppose rescissions are really concerned about is that by taking out these little pots of gold, you eliminate the possibility of them to offset future legislation, future spending without having to affect the budget. So they're just playing games, and CHIP is actually one of the programs that's most used for these kind of budget gimmicks, where they say, hey, there's some money there that we've appropriated, but we're not using it. Let's use it for this other new spending. If we eliminate that, then they actually have to do their job of balancing one priority over another or against another and determining how best to spend our money. So recessions are not going to balance the budget. They're not going to fix a busted budget system. They're not going to reduce our debt. But they do start us down the road to fix future spending. They clean up the budget, and they make future spending harder to pass. So, and also, every dollar that we don't borrow is one that we don't have to ask our children and grandkids to pay back. So there's that benefit too. So, like I said, they're not, recessions are not going to fix the budget, but they do start us that first step to return toward the fiscal discipline and do spending that we need. And so I'll be up at the front of the room, probably up here, at the end of the meeting with postcards and a handout so we can contact our elected representatives in Washington. That would be Congressman Paul Mitchell, Senators Debbie Stabenow, and Gary Peters, and ask them to support this rescissions package that was just passed. They have 45 days to respond, so by mid-June, by my count, right around June 22nd, they have to do something or it will die. So we want to push them as soon as we can to support this and get it passed. And we also should urge them to support future rescissions packages and to take the hard steps of actually reforming our budget and reining in spending. So like I said, I'll be up at the front at the end of the meeting. I'll have a handout, postcards with address labels. They're 3 for $1. And I thank you.